Hello, friends. Welcome back to Book Demystified. Today, we are going to discuss Smart Couples Finish Rich by David Bach. Imagine sitting across from the person you love, the person you've built a life with, and realizing you have absolutely no idea what they actually think about money. You don't know their financial fears, their secret hopes about retirement, or even whether they're carrying debt you've never discussed. Now imagine that this financial silence, this gap in communication, is quietly undermining everything you're trying to build together. You're working toward goals you've never actually agreed on, making financial decisions based on assumptions that might be completely wrong, and wondering why money keeps causing tension in your relationship. This scenario plays out in millions of American homes every single day, and it's not because couples don't care about their future. It's because nobody ever taught them how to align their financial lives as a team. Today, we're exploring a book that transforms how couples approach money together, and I'm going to show you how these principles took one relationship from financial friction to complete financial partnership. This is educational content, not financial advice. Please consult a qualified financial professional before making any financial decisions. There was a couple living in Charlotte, North Carolina, both in their early 30s, married for 4 years. On the surface, they had it together. One partner worked as a nurse practitioner, earning about $82,000 annually, and the other was a high school teacher making $56,000. Combined household income of $138,000, which is well above the national median. They owned a modest home, had decent jobs with benefits, no major crises. But behind closed doors, money was the source of constant, simmering conflict that neither of them knew how to resolve. It wasn't dramatic fights about money, which almost would have been easier to address. It was the small daily tensions that accumulated like interest on a loan. The nurse would see a charge for new golf clubs on the credit card and feel a flash of resentment, but say nothing. The teacher would notice another expensive dinner out that wasn't discussed and feel frustrated, but avoid confrontation. They had separate checking accounts that they'd kept from before marriage, a joint household account that always seemed to run short, and absolutely no unified vision for what they were building together. Retirement felt like some abstract concept that future versions of themselves would deal with. Savings was whatever happened to be left over after expenses, which was rarely much. The breaking point came during what should have been a romantic weekend getaway. They'd driven to the mountains for their anniversary, and on Saturday morning over breakfast, the teacher mentioned wanting to start looking at bigger houses, maybe something with a yard big enough for kids eventually. The nurse's immediate reaction was anxiety, not excitement. How could they possibly afford a bigger house when they barely had any savings and were still paying off student loans? This led to their first truly honest conversation about money in 4 years of marriage, and it was shocking how little they actually knew about each other's financial situation. The teacher had about $32,000 in student loans that the nurse didn't know the exact amount of. The nurse had been contributing to a retirement account, but had no idea if it was enough or if the teacher was saving anything at all. They'd never discussed what financial security actually meant to either of them, never talked about their parents' relationships with money, never set shared goals beyond vague ideas about someday buying a house and someday having kids. They were two people living separate financial lives who happened to share a mortgage, and it was becoming increasingly clear that this wasn't sustainable. That weekend, sitting in a cabin with spotty cell service and nowhere to escape to, they had the most important financial conversation of their relationship. It started with a simple question: what does financial security actually mean to you? And the answers were revealing. For the teacher, who'd grown up watching parents struggle with layoffs and financial stress, security meant having enough savings that an unexpected job loss wouldn't be catastrophic. It meant not living paycheck to paycheck. For the nurse, who'd grown up in a household where money was never discussed and parents worked until their late 60s, security meant retiring early enough to actually enjoy life, not working until they were too old to do anything. These weren't incompatible visions, but they'd never been articulated or aligned. They were both working hard, both contributing to household expenses, but they had no unified strategy. When they got back home, the teacher started researching financial planning books specifically for couples, and that's how Smart Couples Finish Rich ended up on their kitchen table. David Bach's book opened with something that immediately resonated. Most couples fail financially, not because they don't make enough money, but because they never learn to work together as a financial team. Bach explained that money is the #1 issue couples fight about and the #1 cause of divorce in America. But the fights aren't really about money. They're about values, priorities, fears, and dreams that never get properly communicated. The book promised a different approach, one that started with understanding each other's money story before ever touching a budget spreadsheet.
The first exercise Bach recommended was revealing and uncomfortable. Each partner had to write about their earliest money memory and what they learned about money from their parents. The teacher wrote about being 9 years old and overhearing parents arguing about bills, about the fear in their mother's voice when she said they might lose the house, about learning that money was scarce and scary and something you never had enough of. The nurse wrote about money never being discussed at all, about parents who worked constantly but never seemed to enjoy their money, about learning that you just work hard and don't ask questions and hope it works out somehow. They read their money stories to each other one evening, and it was like a light turning on. Suddenly, so many of their financial conflicts made sense. The teacher's reluctance to spend money on anything non-essential wasn't about being cheap. It was rooted in childhood fear of scarcity. The nurse's lack of retirement planning wasn't laziness. It was learned financial avoidance from parents who modeled that same behavior. Bach's point was that you can't align your financial future if you don't understand the money scripts each of you is operating from, often unconsciously. The next step was what Bach calls the couples latte factor, an exercise designed to help couples identify where their money actually goes without judgment. For 1 month, they tracked every single expense, not to create guilt, but to create awareness. The results were eye-opening. Between them, they were spending about $600 monthly on food delivery in restaurants. Neither had realized it was that much because they weren't tracking and weren't communicating. Another $300 monthly on subscription services, many of which they'd forgotten about or rarely used. The teacher had a gym membership for a gym they hadn't visited in 5 months. The nurse was paying for premium streaming services on 3 different platforms. But here's where Bach's approach differed from typical budgeting advice. He didn't say cut everything and live like monks. He said identify what actually brings you joy and what's just mindless spending. Then redirect the mindless spending toward your shared values and goals. The $600 on food delivery? Turns out most of it was exhaustion-based ordering on weeknights when they were too tired to cook. That didn't bring joy, it was just convenience. But the occasional nice dinner out together, that actually mattered to both of them. So they made a plan. Meal prep on Sundays to reduce weeknight stress, keep food delivery to twice monthly as intentional treats, and redirect $400 monthly toward their goals. Bach's framework introduced something called the Smart Couples Finish Rich system, which centered on 3 core baskets: security, retirement, and dreams. The security basket was about building an emergency fund and proper insurance. The retirement basket was about consistent investing for future freedom. The dreams basket was about funding the life experiences that mattered to both of them. Every dollar they earned needed to be directed intentionally into one of these 3 baskets based on agreed-upon priorities. They started with security because Bach emphasized you can't build wealth on a shaky foundation. They had maybe $4,000 in savings, which wouldn't cover even 2 months of expenses if one of them lost their job. This was the teacher's core fear, and it was completely valid.
Following Bach's guidance, they set a goal of saving 3 months of expenses as a starter emergency fund, which came to $15,000. Using the $400 they'd freed up from reduced food delivery, plus another $200 they found by canceling unnecessary subscriptions and negotiating their insurance rates, they were putting $600 monthly into a high-yield savings account. It took 2 years to build that $15,000 emergency fund, but the psychological impact was immediate. The teacher's anxiety about money decreased noticeably. There was still more to save. Eventually, they wanted 6 months of expenses, but having that cushion changed how they both felt about daily financial decisions. When the car needed unexpected repairs, $800, it was frustrating but not devastating. They could pull from savings and replenish it over the next 2 months. This was exactly what Bach meant by security, creating stability that allows you to take smart financial risks and pursue bigger goals. While building the emergency fund, they also tackled the retirement basket. This is where Bach's pay-yourself-first principle became transformative. The concept is simple. You can't save what's left over at the end of the month, because there will never be anything left over. You have to automatically save first, before you pay bills or spend on anything else. Both of their employers offered retirement accounts with matching contributions, but only the nurse was contributing, and only 5%, which meant leaving employer match money on the table.
Following Bach's advice, they both increased their contributions to get the full employer match. The teacher went from 0 to 6%, which the school district matched dollar for dollar. That's literally free money, an instant 100% return on investment. The nurse increased from 5 to 8% to maximize their employer match. Combined, they were now putting about $1,400 monthly into retirement accounts between their contributions and employer matches. The teacher was initially resistant to this, worried about reducing take-home pay. But Bach's book explains something crucial. Retirement saving isn't about what you'll spend in 40 years. It's about compound growth and tax advantages that make it the single best wealth-building tool available to regular Americans. Plus, because it came out pre-tax, their take-home pay didn't actually decrease by the full contribution amount. The reduced take-home pay was only about $900 monthly, not $1,400, because of tax savings. Here's where the magic of compound growth started to become real for them. They calculated that if they consistently contributed this amount, with average market returns of 7% annually, they'd have approximately $2.3 million saved by their mid-60s. That number was shocking. They'd never imagined being millionaires. But Bach's point was that you don't become a millionaire through lottery wins or brilliant stock picking. You become a millionaire through consistent, automated saving over time. Starting in their early 30s gave them about 35 years of compound growth, which turned modest monthly contributions into substantial wealth. With security and retirement baskets funded automatically, they turned to the dreams basket. This is where Bach's approach became really powerful for their relationship. He had them do an exercise. Independently write down your top 5 life dreams, things you want to experience or accomplish, regardless of current financial situation. Then share them and find the overlaps. The teacher's list included traveling to Europe, owning a home with enough space for kids, having financial freedom to potentially work part-time eventually, learning to sail, and creating a college fund for future children. The nurse's list included early retirement to pursue hobbies, traveling extensively, having a workshop space for woodworking, ensuring parents would be financially cared for as they aged, and owning a home with land. The overlaps were clear: travel, a better home, kids and their future, and the freedom that comes from financial security. These became their shared dreams to fund. But Bach emphasized something critical. You can't fund all dreams simultaneously. You have to prioritize and sequence them. Together, they decided the priority order was first, build the emergency fund, which was underway. Second, save for a down payment on a bigger house.
Third, start modest travel with one significant trip annually. Fourth, begin college savings when kids arrived. Fifth, build toward early retirement through continued aggressive retirement saving. For the house down payment, they wanted to save $60,000 to put 20% down on a $300,000 home, which would get them into a better neighborhood with good schools. At their current savings rate, after funding emergency fund, retirement, and some travel money, they could save about $800 monthly toward the house fund. That meant it would take about 6 years to reach the $60,000 goal. Initially, this timeline felt discouraging. 6 years felt like forever. But Bach reframed it in the book. What's the alternative? If they didn't save intentionally, would they magically have the down payment in 6 years? No, they'd be in the exact same position they were now, wishing they'd started 6 years earlier. Time passes either way. The question is whether you're using that time to build toward your dreams or just letting it slip by. This perspective shift was huge. 6 years became not a burden, but simply the path to a goal that mattered to them. One of Bach's most powerful concepts for couples is the purpose-focused financial plan. This means every financial decision gets evaluated against your shared purpose and values. When the nurse wanted to buy a new motorcycle, instead of it becoming a fight, they had a framework for the conversation. Does this purchase align with our values and dreams? It's $15,000. If we spend that, how does it impact our house timeline? It turns out it would push the house purchase back about 18 months. Was the motorcycle worth 18 months' delay on a home with space for future kids? After a real conversation, the answer was no. This wasn't about one partner controlling the other. It was about shared priorities guiding decisions. Similarly, when the teacher wanted to go back to school for a master's degree that would increase earning potential, they evaluated it together. The degree would cost about $25,000 over 3 years and temporarily reduce income since it required going part-time. But it would increase earning potential by about $12,000 annually afterwards. How did this align with their dreams? It delayed the house slightly, but increased long-term financial security and career satisfaction, which supported multiple shared goals. After running the numbers and discussing the trade-offs, they decided it was worth it. This is what Bach meant by financial partnership. Not one person making all the decisions or both people doing whatever they want independently, but genuine collaboration based on shared values and transparent communication. Every major decision was now a team discussion with a clear framework for evaluation. 3 years into following the smart couple's finish rich principles, their financial life was unrecognizable. The emergency fund was at $22,000, well beyond the initial goal, giving them cushion for any crisis. Retirement accounts had grown to about $93,000 combined between contributions and market growth. The house fund had $18,000 saved. They'd taken a 2-week trip to Portugal, a dream they'd funded without any guilt or debt because it was planned and saved for intentionally. Most importantly, they weren't fighting about money anymore. The weekly money dates that Bach recommended had become a cornerstone of their relationship. Every Sunday morning, they'd sit down with coffee and review the week's spending, upcoming expenses, and progress toward goals. It was 30 minutes that eliminated 90% of financial stress and misunderstanding. If something unexpected came up during the week, they had a designated time to discuss it, rather than letting it fester. By year 5, they had saved the full $60,000 for a house down payment. They found a 4-bedroom home in a great school district, put 20% down, and their mortgage payment was actually manageable within their budget because they'd planned properly and avoided getting in over their heads. Bach's warning against house-poor living, where you buy the maximum the bank will approve and have no money left for anything else, had stuck with them. They bought a home they could afford while still funding retirement and dreams, not the maximum they could technically finance. When their first child arrived, year 6, they were ready. They'd already researched and set up 529 college savings accounts for future children, and they started contributing $200 monthly per child. Bach's point about college savings was simple. You can borrow for college, but you can't borrow for retirement. So retirement had to be prioritized, but modest college savings started early meant compound growth would do most of the heavy lifting. 200 monthly from birth to age 18 at 7% growth would provide about $90,000 toward college costs. Not enough to cover everything at current tuition rates, but a substantial head start that didn't require sacrifice. The teacher completed the master's degree and got a position as an assistant principal with a salary jump to $74,000. Instead of inflating their lifestyle proportionally, they maintained their spending and redirected most of the increase toward retirement and goals. This is what Bach called the automatic wealth builder. Every raise, every bonus, every unexpected income increase gets automatically directed to savings and investments before lifestyle can inflate to absorb it. By year 8 of following Bach's principles, their combined net worth had climbed to approximately $412,000, home equity of about $85,000, retirement accounts at $270,000, emergency fund and other savings at $57,000. The numbers were stunning compared to where they'd started, with maybe $15,000 in net worth and constant financial tension. But the real transformation wasn't the numbers, it was the relationship. Money had gone from their biggest source of conflict to something they navigated together as a team. They had shared goals they were actively building toward, not vague someday wishes. They understood each other's financial fears and values, not because they'd always been aligned, but because they'd done the work to understand and honor each other's perspectives. They made financial decisions together based on a framework they both believed in, rather than one partner controlling or both partners operating independently. When the nurse's father got sick and needed financial help, it wasn't a crisis or a fight. They looked at their financial situation, looked at their values, and decided that family security was absolutely a priority. They redirected some dream savings temporarily to help, while ensuring their own foundation stayed solid. This is what Bach meant by values-based financial planning. When your money is aligned with what actually matters to you, decisions become clearer even when they're difficult. By year 10, they were both in their early 40s with a financial foundation that most Americans never build. Retirement accounts approaching $500,000 and on track to exceed $3 million by retirement. Home equity over $120,000. College fund for their child growing steadily. Emergency fund fully stocked. And perhaps most importantly, the freedom and flexibility that comes from financial security. When the assistant principal's position became stressful and unfulfilling, there was freedom to consider other options without panic, because their finances weren't dependent on maximizing every dollar of income. The core principles from Smart Couples Finish Rich that transformed their relationship and financial life are powerful in their simplicity. First, understand each other's money story and values before trying to build a financial plan. You can't align financially if you don't understand where each person is coming from. Those early money memories and lessons shape how we think about spending, saving, risk, and security, often unconsciously. Getting those stories out in the open eliminates mystery and creates empathy. Second, create a shared vision for your financial future based on your combined values and dreams. Don't just assume you want the same things or are working toward the same goals. Explicitly discuss and document what financial security means to you, what dreams matter most, and what you're building together. This shared vision becomes the foundation for every financial decision. Third, implement the three-basket system: security, retirement, and dreams. Security gives you stability. Retirement gives you future freedom. Dreams give your current life meaning and motivation. All three matter, and they need to be funded intentionally and proportionally based on your stage of life and priorities. Fourth, automate everything. Pay yourself first means setting up automatic transfers to savings, automatic retirement contributions, automatic bill payments. If it's not automatic, it probably won't happen consistently because willpower fails and life gets busy. Automation makes your financial plan the path of least resistance rather than something requiring constant discipline. Fifth, have regular money dates to stay connected and aligned. Communication is what prevents small issues from becoming big conflicts. 30 minutes weekly to review spending, discuss upcoming expenses, and celebrate progress keeps you both informed and involved. Money dates aren't about judgment or control. They're about partnership and transparency. Sixth, evaluate financial decisions through your shared values and goals framework. When considering a purchase, investment, or financial commitment, ask whether it aligns with your shared vision and how it impacts your progress toward your dreams. This eliminates arbitrary rules and creates purpose-driven decisions. And finally, remember that finishing rich isn't about having the most money, it's about having enough money to live a rich life as you define it. Rich means different things to different people. For some, it's early retirement. For others, it's generous giving. For others, it's amazing experiences. The point is to define what rich means to you as a couple, and then build a financial life that creates that richness. The transformation from financial friction to financial partnership didn't happen overnight. It required vulnerable conversations, honest assessments, and consistent action over years. But the alternative was continuing down a path of financial stress, misalignment, and conflict, which is exactly where millions of couples remain stuck. David Bach's Smart Couples Finish Rich provided not just financial strategies, but a framework for couples to truly align their financial lives around shared values and dreams. The couple in Charlotte didn't win the lottery or inherit wealth or get lucky with some investment. They simply learned to work together as a financial team, implemented proven wealth-building principles consistently, and stayed focused on their shared vision. Same middle-class incomes, same normal jobs, completely different financial outcome and relationship dynamic. If you found value in this summary, please give this video a like and subscribe to Book Demystified for more transformative book summaries. But I strongly encourage you to read Smart Couples Finish Rich in its entirety. The book contains detailed exercises for couples, specific strategies for different life stages, comprehensive guidance on investing and retirement planning, and nuanced advice for navigating the complex emotional dynamics of couples and money. Bach has created something genuinely helpful for couples at any stage of their financial journey together. Remember, this is educational content, not financial advice. Always do your own research and speak with a qualified financial advisor before making any financial decisions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next summary.